Story 1. Am I the a-hole for pulling out of planning my sister's wedding, causing her to lose her venue? As a wedding planner who's been in the industry for many years now, my 31 male party trick amongst close friends and family is being able to guess how long my clients' marriages will last with pretty alarming accuracy. If you ask anyone in the industry, there are specific indicators while working with a couple that allow us to be able to gauge compatibility. I can usually get down to around a 6-month window when predicting when photos of each other will disappear from socials. This is not me taking joy in crashing and burning relationships. Working in this career field can actually leave you feeling jaded about relationships in general, which is why I'm reluctant to work for friends and family. The specific stress wedding planning puts on some people and couples can bring out the worst in them that you don't see in everyday life. My sister is getting married early next year and practically begged me to plan for her, despite my stance on clients I know personally. I finally gave in, and we began the process back in March. Last week, while we were meeting and finalizing a few things, she asked me about the party trick I mentioned. She said since I had been working with her and her fiancé for months now, I could give my prediction as to how long they were going to last. I laughed and tried to move on. I thought she was joking, but she continued to press the issue. After her continually bothering me about this for at least 15 minutes when I'm trying to move on, I do have work outside of my specific appointment with her that I needed to get to. I finally told her I thought they would last forever. She claimed she didn't believe me and wanted my real number, so I shrugged and told her the truth. 1.5 years. She was livid. I felt incredibly uncomfortable with the whole ordeal, especially with how little she respected my boundaries in what is supposed to be a professional setting, and just tried to usher her out of my office. Instead, she began ranting about my own marriage and said she gives us until the end of the year before we break up, and accused me of being a home wrecker. She finally left, and I emailed her saying I would no longer be involved in planning. I gave her the contact information for all of the vendors we were working with, but told her the venue would no longer be available as they only book to people they have existing relationships with, and my involvement was necessary. I have had to break up with clients before, but this felt particularly rough. She has now told our parents that I am purposefully sabotaging her wedding and that I was unforgivably rude to her when she just asked a playful question. I feel very silly for letting a person disrespect my boundaries over and over again, something I typically wouldn't tolerate, but now I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong. Am I the a-hole? I don't think you're the a-hole if you feel uncomfortable about this. The sister was the one who kept pressuring to do this, kept pressuring this person to plan the wedding, which he had a stance against, pressuring about the party trick. Well, I think in the future this person is never going to work with family or close friends again. But even if they got pressured, I think he would be best to say, all right, I'll do this for you, but don't ask me about the party trick. Especially, don't ask me to be completely honest about it. If you even claim to do this, if you even beg me or even mention it, it's off. I think this person has been put into a corner and had to just end it completely, not the a-hole. Story 2. Entitled aunt claims adult child has to obey her because it's the law. Another post about a parent volunteering their adult child reminded me of this. It happened to my cousin, but I was there for the majority of the story. I remember it so clearly for a couple of reasons, in addition to just having a good memory. It was the first trip after my father had passed away, and it was, sadly, the last trip I took with my mother. She perished less than a year later. My aunt was always playing the big shot of solving people's problems, but using my cousin as the actual person to take on the problem. Always for free. If someone insisted on paying, entitled aunt kept the money. Need a babysitter? A ride? House cleaned? Yard mowed? Errands run? Oh, my daughter can do it. As far as my aunt was concerned, the only reason Emily existed was to cater to her. Emily was her ultimate trophy. Entitled Aunt was entitled long before it became a huge thing. Cast: Entitled Aunt. Emily, cousin. Mike, Emily's boyfriend. Me. Police Officer 1, Police Officer 2, Judge. My aunt has always been entitled. It's her personality type. My mother couldn't stand her little sister, so we tried to avoid her while still maintaining contact with her husband and child. My uncle, their brother, lived further south in the state, so we always tried to avoid Entitled Aunt knowing when we were visiting. On this trip, I was staying with my cousin for a couple of weeks in the summer, and we were going to do the tourist things. Entitled Aunt thought that the university not being in session meant that cousin was slave labor. One day, Emily decided that enough was enough. She was supposed to run errands for a friend of Entitled Aunt and had told her mother she had plans. Her mother, as usual, acted as though Emily had agreed and expected her to comply. Emily just didn't run the errand for the friend as demanded. It was that simple. My mother and I had arrived about 10 minutes before the phone rang. Entitled Aunt called, and though this was back during landlines, she was screaming so loudly that both my mother and I could hear both sides clearly. Entitled Aunt: How dare you embarrass me with my friends? You call Mrs. No Name and apologize immediately. You're grounded for a month, and you may not drive the car at all. Now you make that call and go run those errands now. If anyone can explain how she was supposed to do this without using the car, I'd like to know. Emily: Mom, I'm 22. I do not live in your house, you do not pay my bills, and you do not own my car. Run the errands yourself. I have plans. My mom was a little nervous leaving us at that point. It's a mom thing, and she has met her sister thing. Even though we were both fine. She left just after meeting Emily's boyfriend. We left and went to a water park and a few other things. We go back to the house and we're talking about what to have for dinner. Mom insisted on paying for us to go somewhere really nice for dinner that night. We get back, and Emily's car is gone. She called and asked where it was. Emily: Mom, do you have my car? Entitled Aunt: Yes, I do. Your father brought me over so I could check and see if you had obeyed me. I told you that you were grounded and you were not there when I arrived. I'm keeping the car for a month, but I'm going to let Mrs. No Name borrow it because you've been so horrible to her. Emily: Mom, that's stealing. I want my car back now or I'm going to report it stolen. No, Mrs. No Name can't drive my car. Entitled Aunt: I'm your mother. What I say goes, Missy. You need to learn some respect and get it through your head that I'm in charge and you are the child. You don't own anything. It's mine because I am your mother. The police will likely arrest you for wasting their time. Emily hangs up and looks at me. She is so angry she is crying in rage. Emily: To me: If I call the police, she's going to know that you're here. Me: I can live with that. That fallout was a whole other story. She picks up the phone and calls the police. Tells them the car has been taken without her permission and where it is. Mike drives us over there. We do not want to miss the show. Police Officer 1 knocks on the door. Entitled Aunt answers. Hello, officers. Do you need something? Police Officer 1. Ma'am, the vehicle in the drive matches the description and location of a vehicle reported stolen. Entitled Aunt. It's my car. I took it from my daughter because she's grounded from using it for being disobedient and disrespectful. Police Officer 2. I see. May we have a word with her, please? EA, looking very smug. She doesn't live here. Police Officer 1, who had noticed us across the street. You three? Come over here, please. Did one of you call us? Emily. I did. It's my car, officer. My mother seems to think that she has control over it and me. Entitled Aunt. It's my car. I'm your mother, and you have to obey me. It's the law. Tell her, officers. Police Officer 2. Actually, ma'am, there is no such law. Your daughter is an adult. Entitled Aunt. There most certainly is such a law. I'm going to report you to your chief for not knowing it. I may even sue. Police Officer 1 to cousin. May I see the car registration and your license, please? Emily hands them to him. Police Officer 1. Ma'am, this car is registered in the name of your daughter and only your daughter. It's her car, and you have no right to drive it. Entitled aunt looks at the registration the officer is showing her and then snatches Emily's license from him and slams the door. The police officers look at each other for a moment and then shrug and ring the bell again. Entitled aunt answers it, looking very smug. Police Officer 1. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return the license now. Entitled aunt hands him the license that she has cut into several pieces. Entitled aunt. Now she can't drive because she doesn't have a license. She looks at Emily as though she just scored some odd victory. Then she finally notices me. Entitled aunt. You! What are you doing here? Me. Just trying to have a nice visit with my cousin. She has hated me for years. Entitled aunt. You need to leave. I didn't give you permission to visit. Where is your mother? Me. I don't need your permission. My mother is not here. I can travel without her. Police Officer 1. Ma'am, you're under arrest for destruction of government property. Apparently cutting up a valid license is a felony in some places. Who knew? And grand theft of this car. Entitled aunt. You can't arrest me. I'm her mother. I have rights. Police Officer 2. Yes, you do. He then reads them to her. The officer explains to us that until she destroyed the license, he had been willing to issue an appearance ticket. Then instead of being arrested, she would just have had to appear in front of the judge and get a fine. This was a much bigger deal. Emily ran into the house to tell her father what had happened. We all chatted for a little bit until the phone rang. It was entitled aunt telling him to call their attorney. We left. I drove the car back to Emily's and took her to get her license replaced the next morning. The attorney, called by my uncle, apparently didn't know my aunt, and he showed up at the first hearing a week later to try and get it dismissed. It looked to be going her way at first. EA's attorney. Your Honor, this is a family matter. It's simply a case of a mother disciplining her child and the child calling the police because her mother grounded her from using the car. Judge. So she got mad and called the police, and she, not knowing that it was a crime to destroy the license, did so? EA attorney. Yes, Your Honor, that's pretty much it. Judge. Prosecutor, do you have nothing better to do today? Prosecutor. No, Your Honor, I don't. I consider it rather important. When a 22-year-old woman has her car stolen, it doesn't matter who stole it. She has just as much of a right to justice as someone who has their car stolen by a stranger. Judge. 22? The victim is 22? Prosecutor. Yes, Your Honor. The victim is a 22-year-old woman who is the sole owner of the vehicle in question. Her mother became enraged at her daughter. She then went to her daughter's home, stole her car, and later destroyed her license. EA attorney. Your Honor, I was not aware of the age or living situation of the victim. I was under the impression that the child was a minor who resides with her parents. Entitled aunt was sitting there still looking smug. Her attorney was sweating bullets. Judge. Entitled aunt. Do you realize that these are some very serious charges, and if convicted, you face up to 8 years in prison? Entitled aunt. For what? I have the right to discipline my child as I see fit. She disobeyed me. She will think twice before doing it again. Judge. No, you don't. You have the right to discipline your child within the confines of the law. You have stepped outside of that parameter. You stole your daughter's car. Entitled aunt. I'm her mother. It's my right. It isn't really theft because she's my child and her property belongs to me, by law. Judge. Where did you get your law degree? Entitled aunt. I don't have one. Judge. Then let me be the first to explain that your child is a legal adult. Period. You have no right to anything of hers without her express consent. Period. You may not take her car without permission. Period. You may not enter her home without permission. Period. Do you understand that? Entitled aunt. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm her mother. That gives me the right. I'm in charge. Judge. No, ma'am. I'm in charge. This case will be held over for trial. I went home a week later. Entitled aunt eventually took a plea deal where she had 2 years probation and had to take parenting classes. The parenting classes were Mike's idea, and the prosecutor thought it was great. We laughed hysterically over that because my cousin is an only child. Emily and Mike married a year later and moved the hell away from there. This took place about 30 years ago. Entitled aunt maintained for the rest of her life that the judges, there were 5 for different status hearings, didn't know what the hell they were doing, and she was right. Mind-boggling. She's trying to get support from some people. I'm sure if any one of these people, the attorneys or the judges, agreed with her in any way, she would have accepted that they had authority. But she cannot believe anyone else can be right except for her. Really delusional, even after having to take a plea deal and having to take parenting classes. And thinking that she's right even though she doesn't have a law degree. The only thing you can do is move away from a person like that. It's mind-boggling.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 3. Entitled mother loses her mind when I explain a period to my daughter's friend. My daughter's friend from school came home with her one day. They were doing girly stuff that normal 14-year-olds do, makeup, nails, etc. I hear a blood-curdling scream and run upstairs expecting the worst. I open the bathroom door, and the girl is on the toilet with blood on her toilet paper. I was like, okay, she started her period. Nothing too crazy. My daughter and I sit her down and explain why we have periods and what that means for her from now on. We hug her and congratulate her on this next step of her life. Afterwards, we go get her supplies from the store and grab ice cream. She's all calmed down and feeling special at this point. I took her home and thought it was strange her parents never mentioned anything about any of this. She was 14, after all. About an hour later, I receive a call from her livid mother who berates me for having the audacity to tell her daughter about those private things and that she'll learn things on her own just like she, the mom, had to. I was completely stunned. She had no intention of explaining anything to her daughter. She then said the girls couldn't be friends anymore. Her daughter would still come over without the parents knowing, and still calls me to this day 6 years later for guidance in her life. Well, now, if something like this happens, and this parent, the first step would have probably been to call the parents and let them know what's happening. This is taking place in their house, but it's someone else's parent. People have different ways to educate their kids. I don't think, though, that letting them being ignorant and finding out on their own is the way to go. And in fact, I think that other mother was just kind of following her own guidelines. She said she'll find out about it on her own. She did find about it on her own by being around another adult who was willing to explain it to her along with someone her own age. And it seems like she's knowing where to go with this person for other guidance in the life, like again, 6 years later. So in a way, this daughter really did find out on her own. I don't think she has much to complain about.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.